So I guess it was back maybe 3 years ago now, my fascination with olive trees began. We were living on sabbatical for a month in far southern Italy in the heel of the boot, way south, a place called Puglia, which is famous for its olive groves everywhere. 40% of all olives in Italy come from Puglia. Thank you. And we were living in a typical Puglian house, which is like this little, it looks like a stone circus tent, or like a place a hobbit might live in. They're called Trulli. It was fantastic. And right out our front door, we would go out every morning. Right in front of our front door was this tree, a relatively young olive tree by their standards. It was only like 300 years old. And there each morning we would sit and drink our coffee. And then almost every day I would go for a run. And it didn't matter which direction I ran. I was running through olive groves because they surrounded us in every possible direction. And there was one particular part, my favorite part of the run, where I'd round this corner. And then for a stretch, maybe a mile, it wasn't just a normal olive grove. It was an ancient olive grove. In Italy, if an olive tree is more than 1,000 years old, it becomes a national monument, and they put a little marker on it, and this entire field was full of monuments. And I don't know if you've seen them, but they're massive and gnarly and just stunning, mesmerizing. And I would sometimes just stop. Here's one of my favorite ones. Just stare. This thing has to be 2,000 years old. And I would just sit and think, like, this was planted, like this survived the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. Think of all the cultures and all the people, person after person, who lived and saw this grow. And the thing about olive trees is they're not naturally a tree. Did you know that? If you let them go wild, they become more like forsythia. Like they just sprout up everywhere. They become more like a bush. And eventually the tree itself will die and the fruit will become bad. And eventually the whole thing will die. To get an olive tree to look like that, to keep it bearing fruit, you have to prune it back year after year and keep it together. Which is to say, the only reason there is this field of monuments you can run through in southern Italy, the only reason this tree exists is because for 2,000 years, generation after generation, someone has been there to harvest it, cultivate it, prune it, take care of it. So one day I was looking online and I noticed that near to where we were staying, there was this ancient olive grove and an ancient olive press that you could go and take a tour and do tastings. So I tell my family, guess what we're doing today? Yes, Dad's fascination with olive trees. You're going to be fascinated too. Kids, I know it's your favorite thing. So we get the kids and we go there and maybe you've been to like one of those olive oil tastings, like they have them at the bougie stores in King of Prussia, you know, like this little olive oil stores. Have you ever seen those? This was a lot like that, except you're standing in a field of 2,000-year-old trees. You get the idea. But there's this one tree in that grove, this tree right here. It's carbon dated to be 3,000 years old. This thing was planted before Romulus and Remus founded Rome, but it was sprouting and growing fruit, bearing fruit 1,000 years before Christ was born. But beyond the sheer age, the thing that most impressed me with these ancient olive groves is how they were planned and planted. So our guide pointed out the distance between the trees. Like, these trees are really spaced out. And he said, now the thing is, you can immediately know the difference between an ancient olive grove and a modern olive grove just by the distance by which the trees are planted. So when you're driving down the road, if you see them packed together, you know it's a modern one. Modern olive groves, the trees are planted maybe 15, maybe 20 feet apart. The ancient ones, the Romans knew that for the tree to fully flourish, to come to its complete potential, had to be 60 feet apart. Really, really spread out. Now, of course, the Romans were right that if 60 feet is best for the tree if they're spaced out that far. But here's the thing that I couldn't get over. It's not true until the tree reaches about 500 years old. So if you're looking for olives in your lifetime for like yourself or for your kids or for your kids' kids, for the, let's say for 100 or 200 or 300 years, really the logical thing to do, the best thing to do would be to pack your olive trees in, plant them 15, 20 feet apart, and then you'd have 2 to 3 times the amount of olives. But if you want to plant an olive grove that will last for thousands of years, one that can stand generation after generation, one that will outlast your children's children's children, you have to space them out 60 feet. It's a decision that only makes sense in 500 years. And something about that just captured my imagination, a 500-year perspective. Like I just couldn't get over it. And maybe it's just me, maybe it's just like midlife. I'm going to die. Why am I here? But something in me, something deep in me wants to plant an ancient olive grove. And not literally, yes, I mean, sometimes I do want to move to southern Italy and plant trees 60 feet apart. But I mean, I want to do something that only makes sense in 500 years. Like, I want to be part of something that is so big and so lasting and so beyond me that there's no possible way I could control the outcomes or cause it. All I can do is like get in on it. Like, I want to stop feeling like I constantly have to respond to all the things going on in the world, all the urgent things, and everything is urgent these days. I want to be part of something that doesn't even try to keep up with this world, but will outlast it all. I want to invest my life on something like this. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't urgent things in life. There is a sense of urgency in our lives. Like, you don't know when Jesus will return. He could return at any moment, like a thief in the night when you least expect it. And you might die at any moment. Any moment when you least expect it. Those things are true. There's a grave urgency to how we live, but I want you to not miss the irony here. If you listen to the urgency with which the Apostle Paul and Jesus and Matthew and Peter speak of life, do you know what is so urgent? Do you know what Jesus is urgently calling us to do? He's urgently calling us to live an eternal life, a life without end, life of the age. That's what's so urgent. Like, he's urgently calling us to stop living for the short term. Stop it. Live for something beyond yourselves right now. That's what's urgent. Because, well, he's calling us to live as though we're never going to die, because if you've united your life with him by faith, you're never going to die. At least not in the cease to exist kind of way. And Jesus says it this way in John chapter 8, famously so. Very truly I tell you, like, you can bank your life on this. This is truth. This is foundational. This is reality. Whoever obeys my word, they'll never see death. Knowing that, living like that, that's what's so urgent. So the late scholar, author, genius Dallas Willard used to press this point in some of his talks, which I've listened to, his lectures to his students, and one of his favorite questions to ask was this: what will you be doing 10,000 years from now? You know, if you follow Jesus Christ, you know that you'll be alive, right? You know that what you're doing right now is going to shape what you do 10,000 years from now. You know that how you live right now is going to shape who you are and who you're becoming and what you're doing 10,000 years from now, right? You know that's true. What will you be doing 10,000 years from now? It changes your perspective. It's a matter of whether you plant your olive trees 15 feet apart or 60 feet apart. It's a big difference. It's a noticeably different way of living, and it's a completely different measure of success. So I've been brooding over this for like at least 3 years now. And like I said, I just couldn't get over it, but I haven't really talked about this or shared this with you because, well, frankly, I'm still not quite sure how to live into this. How do you live like that? How do you get that kind of perspective? And I was going to hold it off, but then this past spring, like everything in our church world, at least, completely got turned upside down. Like the world had already been turned upside down through COVID, but then things started to open up, and then our churches merged, and then half of our elder board became new, and we started hiring new staff, and we're still hiring new staff, and and more than 50% of our attendance jumped by 50%, and we suddenly have, for the first time in our 27, almost 28 years history, we have a building. What is this? I mean, it's not new, but it's completely new to us, and we're in the process of remodeling it to make it like new. We're even going to christen what God is doing by giving us a new name. Like everything here is new, and the effect of which is that we have this rare opportunity to do what very few congregations, very few communities have to do at our size and age. We get a mulligan. We get to start over right here, right now. We get to decide right now, we get to be we're the founding fathers and mothers. We get to decide who we're going to be, what this place is going to be for our family and in our community. We get to shape the kind of people we want to be. We get to partner with God and one another in something that, Lord willing, will outlast our children and our children's children. We get to decide how far apart to plant the olive trees. So I'm particularly excited in all of this and particularly concerned in all of this about this building thing. I mean, we've had a church for years, but this is the first time we've had a place we call church. And that has amazing opportunities and horrific dangers. This place we call church has the potential to form or deform, to shape or misshape our community for years to come. And so as we enter into this season for this next few months of discerning, like, who is God calling us to be? What do we want to do? How far do we want to plant our olive trees? Right? How far apart do we want to plant them? When we start making those big decisions about who we're becoming as a church, I want to make sure that we begin with the Word of God. To use Jesus' language, I want to throw some seeds, some biblical stories and image out. And I'm praying that those seeds will get ground into your heart and into your mind, and they'll sink deep roots and begin to bear good fruit. To say it less figuratively, I want you to dream with me. I do. I want to dream big dreams about what this place called church could be, but I want these dreams to be firmly rooted in God's Word. Not in us, not in what's happening in our culture. I want to dream about something that's bigger than us, that we can't even imagine the outcomes yet of, that we can't possibly control. All we can do is get in on. So this Sunday, we're going to begin, and we're not quite going to get to the point of, this place called church. That's where we're headed. Instead, today we're going to lay a foundation. And by laying a foundation, I mean we are going to go to the very basis. We are going to start at the beginning, literally. And the foundational narrative for who I am and why I'm here and why is there something rather than nothing is there's a book in the Bible written for these very things, to answer these very questions. In Hebrew, it's called Bereshit. It's the name for the first three words of our scriptures, in the beginning. In English, we simply call it Genesis, and that's where we're going to begin. So if you would, turn with me, Genesis chapter 1. It's not hard to find. It's the first page of your Bible, all right? First page of your Bible, Genesis chapter 1. And here's the big, broad question that I want to lay out so that in order to know who we're going to be, in order to dream about who we could be, I want to make sure we know who we're created to be. In order to know who we could be, I want to make sure we know who we're created to be. And this starts in Genesis chapter 1, starting in verse 1. I hope this sounds at least vaguely familiar to you. In the beginning, God created only God the heavens and the earth. And now the earth was formless and void. These are great Hebrew words right here. You need, in the few Hebrew words you need to know these. It was formless and void. Tohu and bohu. Say that with me. Tohu and bohu. These are fantastic words. My favorite translation of it is wild and waste. Tohu means formless or chaotic. It's chaos. It's the idea of this vast wasteland that if you go in, you will never come out. And bohu, it just means empty, void, without. And darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the water. So get this, there's this chaos and this void, tohu, vebohu, and darkness and deep. It's this terrifying image that if you had read any other books from this time period, from the ancient Near East, you'd say, I've heard this story. I've heard this story in the Babylonians. I've heard this story in the Egyptians. I've heard this story in the Canaanites. I've heard this story. You know what happens next? Out of the dark, watery chaos, a giant, terrible sea monster comes up and consumes you. That's what happens. But not in this story. There's the Spirit, literally breath of God hovering. And this word hovering is the same word that Isaiah uses to describe a mother bird fluttering over her nest. It's the same word we use of overprotective parents. Hovering. That's what this is. God is there, and he's not afraid. He's not fighting anyone. There's no struggle. There's no tension. He's hovering. It's this language of an overprotective parent. He's so close. You can feel his breath. And it's strangely personal and intimate. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. He speaks. He just speaks. Whatever he's desiring in his heart, in his mind, he speaks. He expresses it, and it creates reality. His desire creates reality when it's spoken or expressed. His desire. All he's got to do is think about something, want something, and it creates reality. The reality itself, the universe itself, everything that exists simply because God wants it to. If he ceased to want it to exist, it would have no reality. It would cease to exist. And God saw that the light was good. He doesn't just create physical reality. He creates moral reality, aesthetic reality. He values it. It's good. It's good. It's good. So this is a sous chef tasting their dish. Well, that's good. This is someone like working on their basement, refinishing the wall, and they finish it. And they're like, oh, it's straight. That's good. That's the sense. It's good. And he separated the light from the darkness. And here we get into God's work of he's going to separate. He's going to bring order to this chaos. So there was light and there was darkness all mixed together in the chaos. He separates the light from the darkness. And since the ancient times, people have noticed a pattern here. So for the first 3 days, God is going to separate things. He's going to form things. So that which is formless, that which is chaotic, that which is tohu, day 1, 2, and 3, he's going to address. So everything's chaotic, so he separates the light from the darkness. He separates the sky from the sea, and he separates the sea from the dry land. And then the next 3 days, he fills those spaces. He's divided it all up. The universe is now in place. Now he fills those. So he's going to address the bohu, the emptiness. So he fills the light with the sun, and the darkness with moon and stars. He fills the sky with birds, and the sea with fish. And he fills the land with plants and every kind of animal. And repeatedly punctuating this is this refrain, and it was good, 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 and it was good. How do you think God feels about creation? It's good. And then on the 6th day, come to the climax. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image and our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock, all the wild animals, and all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. So we get finally to humanity, the pinnacle of God's creation, that he sets above all creation to rule in his behalf as image bearers. You are to reflect me, the way I rule, the way I order all things, the way I do things that are good, good, good. That's what you're to do. That's what you're to do in your work, in your home, in your life. You are to order things and fill things and do that which is good. Now, there's obviously much ink spilled over what it means to be made in the image of God. Lots of debates here. We could have a long, long conversation, which I would love to have at some point, but I want you to not miss what the text directly connects this with. The text directly connects this with ruling. He says, "Let us make mankind in our image and likeness so that they may rule." so that they may rule. So this image of God thing has something to do with ruling the way God rules, the way he orders, the way he creates, being like God, ordering chaos, filling the voids. Now, what you may or may not know is that this language is not original to the Bible. If you had asked anyone on the street in the ancient Near East, hey, have you ever heard of someone being made in the image of God? They'd be like, of course, there are people made in the image of God. They're called kings. Kings are made in the image of God. They rule in the place of God. Uniquely, alone, they are made in the image of God. The rest of us, we're just poor schmucks. So if your God is Baal or Ra or Marduk or whoever your God might be, your king then represents that God over the face of the earth. At least that's how their stories go. But this story is different. And this God, he's unlike any other God. He says that all humans, male and female, every shape and size and color and tone and age, born and unborn, is made in the image of God. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over every living creature that moves along the ground. And God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. So in Hebrew, they don't have superlatives. So good, better, best, they don't have that kind of thing. Or, fast, faster, fastest, they don't have that. So if they want to say you're faster, you say he's fast. Or he's the fastest, he's fast. And here, God says, it's good, it's good, it's good, it's good, it's good. Tov in Hebrew. But when he places humans in their role to reflect him, he says, Tov. That is so very good. I want you to hear this. I want you to feel this. This is how God feels about you. About creation. He blesses you. He looks at you and places you in that. He says, good, very good over you. And this is radically different than anything else you'd find in the ancient Near East. So if you went over to your Babylonian neighbor and be like, hey, we believe in this Adam and Eve story. I know it sounds crazy, but we believe that God really loved us and came after us and blessed us. And what do you believe about where humans come from? They'd be like, let me tell you the story. So you see Marduk, the king of the gods, got in this terrible battle with Tiamat, the goddess of the sea. She's chaos, this terrible sea dragon. But he won, thankfully, and he cut her carcass in half and made half of it into the sky and half of it into the land. But then he created this space, and all the gods started complaining because they're like, now we got this place to take care of. Great, Marduk. What are we going to do with that? So Marduk's dad was like, I got an idea. Remember Kingu, the guy who helped lead the rebellion against you and led all the sea monsters against you in battle? That guy? You're going to kill him. You're going to execute him. You're going to take his blood, and you're going to make a slave labor. That's what you're going to do. So we see this in the Enuma Elish. This is Marduk speaking. He says, blood I will mass from Kingu, from this killed god, this rebellious god. I will mass and cause bones to be. I will establish a savage. He's talking about you. Man shall be his name. Well, man being a savage. Anyways, verily, savage man I will create. He shall be charged with the service of the gods. He'll be our slaves, that the gods might be at ease. Why do you exist? You are a worthless savage, made in the image of blood and gore, made out of the violence of the gods, designed to be a slave forever. You are only worth what you can produce for the gods. Have a nice day. That's the message of the Babylonians, and that's the message of almost every other culture in the world. But this God, this story, is radically, stunningly different. You're created in freedom, not in conflict. You're blessed. You're made for glory. You're given authority. The very authority of God is placed upon you. You represent God, and he declares you to be Tov. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in their vast array. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing, so on the seventh day, he rested from all of his work. And this last day of creation. It's not a day of work, is it? It's unlike any other day. It's a day without end. There is no morning and evening on this day. On this last day, God rests. But he doesn't just rest. He builds into creation this rhythm of work and rest, and he invites us to come rest with him. Why? So that we can sit and out of this place of rest learn to rule like him. We can learn that our value doesn't come from what we produce, but our value comes from a God who created us and loves us and looks over us and blesses us and says, Tov, Tov, I value you. You don't have to do anything. Just come be with me. In chapter 2, verse 4 and following, we then come to this second creation story, which is really not a second creation story. It's the same creation story, but just different, more specific and detailed and particular. And here we hear the famous story of how God formed man out of the dust of the earth and then gave him the breath of life. And then he places him in this garden called delight. That's what Eden means. And the garden, though, this is not your typical raised flower bed here. Listen to how it's described in Genesis 2, verse 8 and following. Now the Lord God had planted a garden in the east in Eden, delight. And there he put the man, Adam, which just means human. So hear this. Throughout this, you'll hear him referred to as Adam and man and mankind. It's all the same word. It literally just means human. There he put the human he had formed. The Lord God made all kinds of trees grow out of the ground, trees that were pleasing to the eye, good for food. In the middle of the garden, there were the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. A river watering the garden flowed from Eden. It's like gushing up from the center out of Eden. And it was separated into 4 headwaters, which had become 4 major rivers. The name of the first is Pishon, and it winds through the entire valley of Havilah. And there is where there is gold. The gold of that land is good aromatic resin, and onyx are there also. So get the image here. Can you picture this? Try. We know from Ezekiel and other passages that there's actually like this mountain there and this river flowing down, and it breaks into 4. And there's one main entrance into the Garden of Eden. And there inside you have this tree of life and these flowers and these everywhere, these gorgeous fruit trees, good for eating, beautiful to the eye. And this place called delight, filled with trees and gold and precious stones and this massive river gushing forth, this is where Adam and Eve, where human, is placed, where they are given freedom, where they are given purpose and dignity. This is where they will rule on God's behalf. This is where they will walk with God in the cool of the evening. This is the way things are supposed to be. This is the way things are supposed to be. In verse 15, we get Adam's job description. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden, delight, to work it and take care of it. Do you hear the 2 words? To work it and take care of it. In Hebrew, it's abad and shamar, to work or serve. In this context, it likely means to till the garden, take care of it. But don't just think of working the ground. Think of an olive tree. If you don't prune it back, it'll become a bush. So the garden needs someone. It can't do it on its own. It is a gift from God, but God intentionally is doing this in partnership with the human. That the human is an essential part of this. And so we have. He's called to work, but also to keep. And this is the same idea of the shepherds keep watch over their flocks at night, to protect, to feed, to nurture. Those are the 2 words. That's his job description. And then in this next section, we realize that even with the perfect job, he's got the perfect location. He's got the perfect relationship with God. He's got the perfect body. There's no health problems. And yet something's wrong. Something is missing here. It is not good for man to be alone. So God takes him and puts him to sleep, and he takes a side of Adam. It's not just a rib, it's like a side of Adam, and he fashions this into what we know as living, or Eve. And when they come together, Adam sings this song, "At last, I found what life could be." And when they come together, now in this job, in this calling, in this wholeness. They come together, they fit together perfectly, body and soul. And as they love each other and serve together and work the ground together, and they keep it and they serve God together, as they do that, they reflect the image of God. That's what they're designed to be. And then we get to that last line that describes Adam and Eve and their relationship, probably more than anything else. Verse 25. Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. Of course, as a middle school boy, I thought this was wonderful. But once you get over the nudity thing, have you ever really considered what this must be like? To be so secure with what God thinks of you and what other people think of you that you can share yourself completely, no barriers, no fear. No fear of being manipulated or hurt or misunderstood or rejected. Can you imagine that kind of security? To be completely open, this is who I am. I have nothing to hide, no pretenses, nothing between us. Can you imagine? I don't know if I can. So I don't know about you, but Adam and Eve, not a lot of people believe that they're real people today. I'm in this minority that actually believes they're historical people. I don't know where you're at on that. But whatever you think about the historical Adam and Eve, you know that this story is true. Like whether you believe they're real people or not, whether you believe they're historical people or not, let's say it that way, you know that people are made for something greater than themselves. You know that they have intrinsic value. You know that. No one has to teach you that. You know that people are made in the image of God. You know that work is supposed to be good and just and meaningful. You know that we're designed to be completely vulnerable. You long for that. You know that you're supposed to walk with God in the cool of the evening. You know that you are created for a deep rest. And yet, there's this massive gap, isn't there? Like, this is not the way things are. People don't quite know who they are. You don't quite know who you are. I don't quite know who I am. Work is frustrated and frustrating. Life doesn't feel blessed. You can't just go around sharing yourself completely with other people, or you will be so scarred and hurt. And God, He doesn't always feel present. He often feels absent. And that is, of course, Genesis chapter 3. Adam and Eve, they do what we've all done. They believe the lie that God is holding out on them, and they try and become their own God, try and take God for themselves. And that's the moment when they realize, and when we all realize, that reality itself, the way things are supposed to be, is intrinsically bound up in this person known as God and a relationship with Him. That when we cut ourselves off from God, we cut ourselves off from reality, that everything begins to unravel. Like, we no longer know who we are. We no longer know how to relate to one another. We no longer know our place in the universe. And this kind of chaos that breaks out after that has no place in the garden, no place in God's home. So they're invited to leave. You might know they're forced to go east of Eden, and the one entrance to Eden is now blocked. 2 cherubim come with flaming swords, and they're blocked. There's no way back. And in some ways, the whole of human history, the whole human story could just be humans are trying to recreate or get back into Eden without God. It's an attempt to find our identity, our freedom, our purpose, our dignity, our authority, our place in this universe without God. And without God, it is destined to fail. So I'm guessing up to this point at least, this is vaguely familiar. Maybe you've never heard of Marduk before, but more or less these ideas about like the image of God, Adam and Eve, Garden of Eden, naked and unashamed, living east of Eden, you probably, just living in our culture, even if you've never read the Bible, these are probably kind of familiar to you. But what is likely new information to you, and where I want to land today, what I want to be the foundation of where we're going to head for this place called church, is a point that comes right out of this text, but is not widely known today, and it's this. Creation is a temple. Like by design, from the beginning. Like the way in which God structured creation with a garden at the center filled with gold and precious stones, God resting and ruling, placing Adam in the center, telling him to work it and keep it. All of this together and many more things come together to strongly suggest that God is not just making a place, he's making a temple. Now, this rabbit hole goes really, really deep if you dive in. And so I don't want to lose anybody in this. Let's just say, just because you've never heard of it, which you may not, doesn't mean it's a new idea. So Jewish rabbis were talking about this before the time of Jesus. In the first century, there's a guy named Josephus who was a first century Jewish historian, and he writes the Antiquities of the Jews. And in book 3 of that, he gives what was just a popular Jewish understanding of the day. He says, the temple is a miniature model or a microcosm of the universe. The different parts of the temple in Jerusalem reflect the different realms of creation. That's what everyone believed back then. So to say it maybe otherwise, the Jewish temple, this place right here, in the day of Jesus, what it looked like, was designed to reflect all of creation, reality itself, like the structure of the universe, because creation is a temple. So here's what I mean. If you fast forward to 977 BC, there's a guy named Solomon. Ever heard of him? He's a king. He builds the first temple for the Jewish people. God calls him to build this. And so he finally gathers everything together, constructs the temple, and we get the story of him completing the temple in 1 Kings chapter 5 through 7. Do you know how long it took him to build the temple? Can you guess how many years? 7. Okay, well, that's it. But then when does he consecrate it? In the 7th month at a 7-day festival? Oh, uh-huh. In fact, if you start going through that text, you find every verse underlies almost every verse a series of 7s, just like Genesis chapter 1. And then where's the entrance to this temple? Where does it face? It's in the east, and it only has one entrance, just like the Garden of Eden. And if you go up to that entrance, what would you see? On your right and your left, you would see water and fire. You'd see a sea, this big giant pot of water, and you would see a raging fire, the brazen altar. What do you see if you go to the Garden of Eden? You see a river, water, and you see fire, cherubim holding their swords. And when you enter into the first room, if you get past the cherubim alive, when you enter into that first room, what do you see? Well, you see this menorah. What is a menorah? This lamp. It's fashioned like an almond tree in bloom. For 2,500 years, people have been speculating, I wonder if that's supposed to point us to the tree of life. And then how is this space inside, this first and second room inside described? It says in 1 Kings chapter 6, on the walls around the temple, both the inner and outer rooms, he carved cherubim, this is Solomon, palm trees, and open flowers, just like a garden. 2 Chronicles, we get another description. He, Solomon, overlaid the inside with pure gold, paneled the main hall with juniper and covered it with fine gold and decorated with palm tree and chain designs. He ordained the temple with precious stones, and the gold he used was the gold of Paravim. He overlaid the ceiling beams, door frames, walls, doors of the temple with gold, and he carved cherubim on the walls. Do you see it? The garden imagery. Here, flowers, palm trees, budding almonds, gold, precious stones, cherubim. Does it remind you of anything? Anyone? Get this. Do you remember what Adam's job description was in Genesis 2:15? What was his job? Yeah, he was to work it and keep it, right? To work it and keep it. In Hebrew, it's abad and shamar. He was to work it and keep it. And do you know who else has that exact same job description? I mean, word for word, identical job description. Do you know who has that? Numbers chapter 3, 8, and 18. It's the job description of the Hebrew priests. The priest. Adam is a priest. The priest's job is to work for God, to serve him, and to keep God's word, to guard it. That's what they're called to do, just like Adam. Now, I could go on here, but you get the idea, right? So the temple and the Garden of Eden are intentionally designed to reflect one another because that's what creation was originally designed to be. Creation was designed to be a temple. All of it. Every square inch. The whole thing. Every place you can go was designed to be a place where you know and enjoy and share your life with God and one another, a place where God himself resides, a place of worship. So forests and oceans and cities and lakes and rivers in the kitchen, in the bathroom, in your bedroom, at the workplace, your neighborhood, the grocery store, a temple. All of it. That everything you do in every one of those spaces is meant to reflect the glory and rule of God, that you are to be the image of God there, that is God's temple. The whole thing is designed to be a temple. Every bit of it. We are meant to live every moment of our lives in the very presence of God. Now, the one big difference between this temple, though, and any other ancient Near Eastern temple is that if you go into an ancient Near Eastern temple, if you could get in there, you would see actually a lot of the same imagery. You would see a tree of life, likely. You would see cherubim guarding the entrance. You might see fire and water. You might see some of these same images throughout. But when you get to the very center of any other ancient Near Eastern temple, you know what you're going to see? You're going to see something like this guy. You know who that is? Nebu. You may have heard of his representative, Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah, this is the Babylonian god that Nebuchadnezzar is the representative, the image of. He images Nebu. So if you go into Nebu's temple, you find him, this idol to him in the middle. But in this temple of God, do you see what he's done here? There is no image. Why? He doesn't set up a golden image to reflect his glory and rule. Rather, you're his image. You are. You are. People, humanity. You reflect his rule and his goodness and his greatness. You point people to his worship. This image of God cannot be captured in stone and gold. It can only be incarnated, lived in relationship. It cannot be seen in impersonal objects. It can only be seen in persons. So Adam and Eve, they are not just portrayed as priests working in service to God. They are priests who are given the authority to rule. They are priest kings. So creation is a temple. Humanity is a royal priesthood. Peter says it this way in 1 Peter chapter 2. But you are a chosen people. You, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, his treasured possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. You are all of that so that you may praise him. You exist to be priests, kings, to further his praise because you only know who you are, what you are, why you're here. You only know your identity and your place in the universe when you realize it in worship. Because life is about worship. That's it. That's why you and I were created. It's who we're created to be. It's why there's something rather than nothing. Creation is a temple. Humans are royal priests. And life is about worship. Every bit of it. Now, I don't mean, just to declare, sometimes we talk about worship specifically being what Heather leads in singing. Not to exclude that, but that's a very narrow focus of worship. Here, when I talk about worship, I'm talking about something much, much bigger here. I'm talking about worship. So if you go to Genesis chapter 1 and 2, you will see no singing, except maybe some think Genesis chapter 1 is the song of creation, but God's the one singing. And then Genesis chapter 2, of course, there is that poetic line at the end when Adam sees his naked wife. But that again, that's not what we're talking about here. When I say worship, I mean it in the way the Bible means it, in the largest possible sense, not just singing a song or some immediate experience with God. I mean, here's the heart of it, here's the fundamental part of it, responding to God. Living your life in response to God. The God who created you. The God who blesses you. The God who calls you good. The God who calls you, invites you into his rest. The God who gives you power and authority to represent him. That when you experience that God, that love, that kindness, when you meet that God and experience him, you worship. You value him. You treasure him. You say things like, better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. As the deer pants for streams of water, so I long for you. I long to be in your presence. It's just your logical act of worship that you would then respond by offering yourselves as a living sacrifice. And that's what you're created for. It is here in this temple called creation, in your work as a royal priest, in the freedom of knowing that you are fully loved, blessed, cherished by God. here in worship in response to that. You're created to live your life, created for worship. That's who you are. That's why you exist. That's why there's something rather than nothing. And can I say, that's something that's going to make sense 500 years from now, even 10,000 years from now. It's something so big, so lasting, so beyond us, that there's no possible way you can cause or control it. All you can do is get in on it. That's something that doesn't even try to keep up with this world, but will outlast it all. That's how we learn to stop responding to the world, because our lives are lived in response to what God has already said, already done on our behalf. Now, what does that have to do with a place called church? Well, nothing and everything, but that's next week. Father, I pray, Lord, that you would make us worshipers. God, it is so easy to be blinded and deaf to what you've done, to not be able to see you, to not be able to hear you, to not be able to know your love for us and what you've created us for, Lord. And all we feel, Lord, is this confusion. All we feel is this brokenness, this longing, and we cease to believe what we're really created for, or that it's even possible to ever experience that again. God, I pray that you'd break through that. I pray that you'd make us a people who trust you, who believe what you say about us over what the world says, over the lies we tell ourselves, over the lies that have been spoken to us, that we believe what you say about us, and we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.